Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to the live stream. I'm gonna just post the link into my Telegram in a second. And we do have some very important details to share here because next week the market is gonna be very, very spicy. Things are gonna be getting very exciting. This week was pretty much I would say it was pretty much the warm up for what's to come next week. It kind of feels like the calm before the storm. All right, so let's speak of some important details here because, as I mentioned, reason for this quick live stream is next week things are gonna be really filled with a lot of opportunities, and I can already tell you what to expect. Just as I've been telling on my previous live streams, whenever I came on any of these live streams, easily called whatever was expected, and right now I do believe this is something we need to speak of because this entire week, I'm pretty sure a lot of traders have been probably blowing accounts or just losing this entire week because naturally the week was completely slow. And after that, it wasn't really moving according to probably the most retail traders' expectations because what I can tell you is what most traders had been expecting is because last weekend, roughly on Thursday, Friday, we just had the recent developing conflict between Iran and Israel. Of course, that has been driving a lot of retail expectation for the market to be moving higher and of course, everybody was probably buying as soon as the market was opening up. But of course, to everybody's surprise, as the market nature works most of the time, when a lot of traders are expecting the same thing, it's never really going to be happening according to that bias because naturally the price has to be going against everybody else. So that being said, right now, as we see the entire market was dropping backwards completely. And I'm gonna show my charts in just a second to show you on the real market what's gonna be happening next. But basically what happened as a quick summary is market being completely dropping backwards, liquidity pools and of course liquidity providers were basically grabbing all of the retail funds from most of the traders. And of course, once that happens, pretty much when the market maker grabs all of the funds available, they are going to be pumping the market to the upside when all of the retail traders are missing the opportunity. So that's exactly what's going to be happening. I know some people have been asking why was gold dropping, and that was of course happening for a very good reason. Main reason why gold was dropping actually is if you guys take a look at how the Powell speech was ongoing, and of course, if any of you guys are taking a look at this, I mean, you should be keeping up with what the FOMC is saying. But of course, during this conference, a lot of investors have been selling gold due to the nature of what Powell was saying. So they had been some discussions of they are thinking to have interest rate cuts later, and of course that was dropping the market lower on gold. So that's pretty much what happened this week, and that's why on the 18th of June we've seen that massive drop. Because on this FOMC conference that you guys see right now, that's when Powell was saying the rate cuts might be pushed over to the next upcoming month. So of course that's how the investors were reacting to it. But yeah, that's basically this. And aside of that, we still perfectly know that all of the conflict between Iran and Israel hasn't been decreasing at all. I can confidently tell you there's little to no sign that any of this would be decreasing in the tension at all. It's going to be only increasing in tension, as also the United States will very likely step into it at some point in time. You guys can only imagine how much more it is going to be affecting the market to the upside. So that's what we're going to speak of today, because now that we know gold has been making a lot of massive pullback and it has been reaching a very important level of resistance, it is going to be pushing to the upside from that point on, most likely during next week. This week was the time the investors were capable of making the pullback, and next week is when most likely the market is going to be expanding. Because as you know, very often, if the market is in a very much upward trend, and I'm speaking of this in terms of a concept across the board, I'm not just speaking of gold, but what you gotta know of the market is a lot of times, if there's a very significant move into the upside, especially on the higher time frame, that usually takes 1 week time on gold typically, and of course it goes across the board. So I'm speaking of all of the pairs. That takes usually 1 week time. And if the market is planned to go bullish long term on a bigger picture, like much more significantly, what you can know from that is as the market's song is working, and we are speaking right now of a specific market cycle, if one single week is completely moving bullishly, and on the bigger picture, you're also expecting that to be further expanding, that has to be moving according to a standard market nature. So what does that mean? I can just go all the way back to the basic things of explaining again that whenever the market is creating any sort of movement, typically it creates a pullback before moving higher, or if it goes lower on the long term, it should typically create a pullback back lower and back higher, and then of course go lower. So there's a nature of the market that after every impulsive move, it is of course going to be falling into a correction. So that's exactly what this cycle of the market is creating. Is if you go to the market and you're also going to be studying how this is going to be happening in a price. If there's 1 week worth of price movement developing to a certain trend, typically before the next large move, the new week is going to be 1 week of movement that's moving against it. And that's exactly what we see here. If we take a look at this week, this entire week has been completely moving against from the previous one, because that's how the market nature has to be compensating from what it has been previously doing. So you kind of have to imagine the market itself, it is trying to compensate on what it has been previously doing. So that also, like I mentioned, it goes across the board because, if I'm gonna bring up a different example of this ID, let me bring up Bitcoin, for example, with this narrative. Let's just take a look at how big of a movement happened on Bitcoin a longer time ago, like back in 2020. It has been absolutely significant. And if you take a look at the actual pullback the market was creating, it was also compensating for that pullback because, of course, the time of the pullback was roughly the same time as the market was moving higher. So, do you understand what I want to say with this? So, very often, the time and the time frame of the pullback is roughly the same time frame in terms of the time window, the distance of the time, as it is usually going to be on the impulsive move. So, of course, why is it going to be important? Because if you're going to start understanding that, hey, something has to be creating a certain length of time window, like, from, let's say, a 30-day impulsive move happened, likely approximately 30-day pullback is expected for the next upcoming month of expansion. So that's exactly what's going on with gold right now. I'm going to also show that on the technical chart in just a second. But of course, because we have this understanding of it, This is absolutely in line with everything that we see right now. So I can just go on with all of the different reasons of why I'm gonna be already bullish on gold as the market is pretty much opening up next week. But number one reason is exactly this. Number two reason is, like I mentioned, Iran and Israel conflict hasn't been decreasing at all. It's only getting more tense. If you look at the entire situation, it's only getting more and more extreme. And of course, we perfectly know that is for us, it's good in terms of the understanding of the market because we know very clearly and very confidently the price of gold is indeed going to be pushing much higher. So right now, let me go to the chart and let me show you. So this is the current stage. I'm gonna just remove the past trades I had. Actually, this week I haven't had too many trades, to be fair. Last week was actually more active. So, here, these ones. This week was a bit less active. But anyway, let me just remove the illustrations and let me show you how the two different weeks are going to be progressing. So exactly what I'm been explaining a second ago. This here has been, so this was the specific day, this here, when there was this recent conflict, starting to develop. So this Thursday, this was that day. Market started moving higher from here, from this Monday point, entirely moving higher. And of course, we had that single range of impulsiveness of the market moving from here up to here. And this was, of course, as I mentioned, this was 1 week of time in the market. Right now, if you take a look at how things have been further progressing, basically we opened up here. This was this entire week, if you take a look at it. And of course, understandably, now at this point, we are just closing the price and closing the market for the weekend. That has been, again, another week of movement. So do you see how this is going to be progressing? Because this is nothing else than just the healthy pullback of the market that it had to be creating. So that being said, I'm not dropping the buying ideas. I'm not getting pushed away from any sort of buying ideas. Or the only thing that this is telling me, and the only thing that now I'm understanding from the market, now that I'm considering the fact that we just came to this approximate pullback area, is nothing more than this was a natural pullback for the market. So this was nothing more than just the market creating what it should be creating, market nature following the standard market nature. And of course, with that logic, we do know that if this is the standard market nature, we are gonna be pushing to the upside because this was nothing more. It's not a bearish trend. It's not a selling market. It's completely buying market. It's completely bullish. This is just a natural pullback for the price. So that's something I do want to highlight in the first place. That a lot of people have been. I know a lot of people have been backing off from buying the market. It's understandable. I also know some people are in selling trades. It's not really smart idea to do so. You will be completely going against all of the main main logical reasons that's going to be happening. You're going against the clear understanding the price is going to go higher, which is the war. You're going against the fact that based on the Powell speech, next week the market should be pushing higher because a lot of times when Powell is speaking, and if they are speaking of the rate cuts, and what they have been speaking specifically is they are only expecting to do rate cuts in the next upcoming months a bit later. That is only affecting the market until the end of this week. So there's no logical reason to, next week as the market is opening up, it is just not justifiable to say that we are going to be having any sort of bearish trend. So that's also the main thing that I do want to draw your attention to. So very confidently, I'm on the buying side, just to make that clear. Other thing, let me also draw your attention to another thing. Not many people speak of it because it's kind of ignored, and every time, as far as it is understood, every time anything that seems too simple, it is often ignored, and unfortunately it's a bit overlooked. But something I do want to mention here is I'm just gonna show you something here very quickly, and I'm pretty sure you're gonna completely see the same thing. This here, the price moving back to this price point. So let's be exact with it. So the price moving here to the approximate 3,350 point level here, that wasn't done on an accident. So that pullback wasn't just done randomly. Let me show you something, and then you're gonna also see a bit more logical picture of why the market was naturally pulling back towards this approximate area. I'm gonna go and switch to the line chart. And what this is, the line chart is revealing a completely different perspective of the price. If I'm gonna look at the market this way, I would be a bit confused with what's going on, where's the sensitive support resistance of the market. But as I'm gonna go here to the line chart, let me show you something. What I'm gonna notice immediately is there's a level in the price where the market is just connecting multiple times over and over again. And guess what? It just happens to be that this exact price point here, which once again is not a random level, it is. I'm gonna also explain in a second why it's this level. But basically, what you're gonna notice here is if you're gonna start looking back here and start connecting where the line chart is having the most potential connections, very quickly you're gonna realize that is basically between the 3,300 40 level and also the 50 level. So just somewhere in between that area, exactly where the market was coming back to. Because if I'm gonna go ahead and show you that basically I'm easily noticing that literally the line chart is revealing the same level of connections over and over again in terms of all the way from the furthest point all the way literally moving here and then the market rejecting it. This to me is a very clear sign that this pullback here, now that we have came to this level, I'm confidently calling it as a level of sufficient pullback because logically that's where we have seen the recent rejection, which is again matching with all of these things in the past in terms of this entire line chart level, everything connecting over and over again. And now that I'm considering the fact here that I just had the recent rejection, and guess what? Is the bottom closing price of the line chart right there. That's literally at the same price point that I'm showing here at that 33.50 level and also 33.40 level. So why is this going to be so important? This here is going to be very important because if I'm going to go here and say that this lowest point in the price is basically rejecting this exact level of support resistance from the left side, which I just showed you, it's interconnecting over and over again at the same level, and it's literally the same price, basically here, and that same price point over and over again getting connected. Now that we have rejected it, it is also confirming me that I'm losing my interest for the selling trades. I'm further gaining interest to take buying trades and moving forward for next week in terms of buying trades. because this here is finally confirming the reason of why the market is rejecting it. And of course, at the same time, it is telling me there's no other logical reason for the market to go lower. So that's basically support resistance. And like I mentioned, guys, this idea and this theory, this concept is often overlooked. It is something everybody knows, but everybody ignores it. And of course, as most concept goes, everybody ignores the important ones, which is mostly the ones that have been already in front of you all of the time. So yeah, that basically definitely justifies the price point here with the 3,400 3,340 and the 3,350 level basically. This approximate range, it does justify that as a very decent idea of the market actually rejecting it from it. And because it's rejecting from it, we are gaining confidence in the bullishness. And of course, not even mentioning that if I would go and show you how things are progressing on the bigger picture, naturally, let me go back to the normal chart. Now the same thing is seen just differently. We pretty much had price moving back to a discounted area. Again, a very simple concept. Discounted area, basically. But what's more important right now is I already confirmed on the line chart that that level of the market is likely a support resistance. So it's likely to be a very sensitive area. And now I'm gonna go back to the real market, to the real charts. And what I want to look for here is I'm gonna understand how the candlesticks are rejecting that level. I already know that from the line chart that was identified as the level of sensitive area. Now on the daily time frame, which like I mentioned, daily time frame is very often a very decent time frame to use because you can confirm a lot of things with it very easily. But right now on the real candles, so back to the real candlesticks, this here is telling me clean rejection. It's undoubtedly right in front of you. And if you see it differently, you gotta open your eyes to this. Very, very clean rejection on the daily time frame, specifically on the daily time frame. And that's actually a huge thing because a lot of times, if a daily candle is rejecting something just like that, you just cannot get a stronger confirmation for the price to genuinely go ahead and move away from a level. And this is pretty much the main narrative you want to have a lot of times when in trading. The VIX in the market, the candles in the market, the entire price action nature, it is telling you a lot of things together. And once you align one reason with another reason, one logic with another logic, it just starts coming together into a whole complete, very, very understandable picture. So, now if I would be listing the different reasons to you, I just showed you line charts on support resistance, rejection candle on the daily time frame. We just pull back to a discounted area, which discount, everybody knows that shit. Discounted area, easy as that. Daily time frame rejected it absolutely perfectly. The Fed event, so the Fed, so Powell's speech was actually on the 18th. So let me also remind you of this. Powell's speech was on the 18th. And, basically what happened here is, let me just clarify a couple of things here. So reason why basically gold was dropping from the 18th lower is a couple of different things. So what you're gonna know is the Fed has been telling in this meeting that they are only interested in rate cuts a bit later. That has been triggering some bearishness on gold. And if you look at how gold was moving lower, the bigger move lower was actually on the 18th. So let me go back to real market and let me show you. So on the H1, so take a look at this. See? So this is where that bigger impulse move was moving lower. That's pretty much what was driving the market further lower, of course, so the speech of Powell. But like I mentioned, this was for this week. Next week, because it's gonna be a new speech, and I'm gonna show you another thing in just a minute. As I'm mentioning, this speech and this information by the Fed that they are interested in cutting rates only in the next couple of months a bit later, it has been dropping gold lower. That has been the effect on investors. And that's not relevant next week. Next week, the reason why it's not going to be relevant, just so you know the details here, next week is going to be a new power speech. Next week, new market, a new market cycle, and then, of course, we're gonna have a different perspective of it. So, I just want to share this as a side note that next week gonna be a different power speech, and that's also the other main reason why the speech that we had today, I mean, this week is no longer relevant because also, according to market cycle, it is only just relevant for the end of the week. Next week is new market. If you start learning a lot about how these news events are connected in terms of a cycle effect, you're gonna have a different understanding here. But yeah, let's just go back here. So that's exactly the thing also matching with it. The rejection candle here, and that definitely confirms how we're gonna move forward for the next trading week. I could go on with the entry. Speaking of the entry, but I'm not gonna go into too many details of how to take the trade, stuff like that. That's a bit different. But yeah, definitely this does absolutely cover the details of the further bullish expectation on gold, very, very confidently on the bullish side. And of course, the weekend gonna be closing. Market might even open with a market gap. So as long as actually we might have some conflict going on during the weekend, you might want to be ready for a market gap. That happens a lot of times. And if you look back at the market, how many times there's a news event actually published on a weekend that's creating the market gap, that's kind of a war event. A lot of times. I can remind you of the war against Ukraine and Russia, 22nd of February. You guys can even go back. So 2022, 22nd of February. Market also opened with a massive market gap because the conflict was published during the weekend. So what you're gonna know with it, if this weekend, if any of you gonna see any sort of main publishment that there's any sort of further ballistic missiles, any sort of missiles or explosions, you might want to expect a market gap in the price. So, how to execute it and how to trade the market gap, gonna be a complete different complete different topic. I won't go there, but something to be aware of. So as the market opens, just be mindful of that because if you're just gonna go and take a buying trade just because you think that we're gonna go bullish from here without any sort of other planning, you're taking a big risk with it because if you open the trade on the gap itself, you could blow up your accounts in a matter of seconds. So as the market will open, you want to have things settle down a bit and of course execute the trade once things have been settling down. So, but I'm pretty sure I'm gonna probably do another live stream just to cover some details of that too. And I might as well make these live streams actually like regular basis. I also wanted to make it regular last time when we had our last meeting. We do want to do these YouTube live streams regularly because YouTube is probably the only space where a lot of a lot of bullshit traders are just talking bullshit. So I do want to bring something that's actually valuable and like genuinely valuable content. So guys, I'm gonna cut the streams here. I appreciate the attention. Have a good night. And next week gonna be a very exciting week ahead of us. See you guys.